Hey, today is World Press Freedom Day. Wouldn't you think it would be World Freedom of the Press Day? I don't know. I don't get to make up the rules on these kinds of things. I just tell you what national day or world day it happens to be. So I don't know. You might be one of these people who thinks all journalists are just fake news purveyors. Then again, you might be like myself and think that most journalists are actually pretty legit, even when they're telling me something I don't want to know or disagree with. I don't know. I have no clue. But there is one thing I do have a clue about today, and that is the Daily Dope is in the air. Howdy, gang. Yes, I'm back once again. I'm Jeff McAleer, and I am your host here at the Daily Dope, as well as happening to be the Grand Poobah of the GamingGang.com. Welcome aboard. It is Thursday, May 3rd. And on Thursdays, I like to talk role-playing games. And today, I am going to review the core book for Torg Eternity from the fine folks over at Ulisses North America. So that's coming up in just a little bit. Got some news cooking as well that I'm going to cover. Did want to mention, yes, today is World Press Freedom Day. Does that mean the press who are actually imprisoned in some of these countries ruled by dictators should be freed? I don't know. Or is it freedom of the press? I don't really know, because I looked on Twitter and I was getting a variety of different things. But I am a believer in freedom of the press. What can I tell you? I'm just one of those sorts of guys. Anywho, I got a pretty big show ahead of us. And I'm pretty excited about Torg Eternity. And I dig it a lot, but there's a few things that I'm going to kind of talk about as well. But I do want to point out there is chat available. This is a live stream, so if you happen to be hanging out on YouTube, feel free to say hello, chime on in. If there's something you want to know about Torg Eternity while I'm doing the review, feel free, kick in with a question, and I will be sure to answer it if I can. So anyway, let's get on to the news, because got a few eclectic pieces of news today. Do want to talk about the latest game from Stonemaier Games has been revealed, and it's on the horizon. And interestingly enough, it's a family-friendly game that's sort of inspired by Scythe. And I have the dope on My Little Scythe. We have a new game inspired by Scythe, and with its origins as an award-winning print-and-play game, My Little Scythe is a competitive, family-friendly game for 1 to 6 players in which each player controls 2 animal miniatures embarking upon an adventure in the kingdom of Palm. Is it Palm? I don't know. I haven't played Scythe, actually. It's designed by Hobie Chow with his daughter Vienna, as well as the Automa team for the solo version, and illustrated by Katie Kiao. I apologize. I know I'm getting these names wrong, but I am trying. In an effort to be the first to earn 4 trophies from 8 possible categories, players take turns choosing to move, seek, or make. Make, not mate, make. These actions will allow players to increase their friendship and pies. Everybody likes pie. Power up their actions, complete quests, learn magic spells, deliver gems and apples to Castle Everfree, and perhaps even engage in a pie fight. Oh, the humanity. Some of My Little Scythe's mechanics are inspired by the best-selling game, you guessed it, Scythe. It caught the eye of Stonemaier Games as a fan-created print-and-play game in 2017. It even went on to win the Board Game Geek 2017 award for Best Print-and-Play Game. There's actually a short teaser trailer for the game, so why not sit back and take a peek at it with me?
Inspired by the best-selling game, Scythe, an epic journey begins. The stakes have never been higher in My Little Scythe. Play as a pair of animal seekers in this 1-to-6 player competitive family-friendly game. Set off across the Kingdom of Palm to increase your friendship, have unique encounters, stock up on pies, make deliveries to Castle Everfree, all with the goal of earning 4 trophies from 8 possible categories. On your turn, choose to either move your miniatures, seek for apples, gems, and quests, or make pies, magic spells, or power-ups. Don't be surprised if you get into a few pie fights along the way. Embark on a journey into My Little Scythe with 14 miniatures, 5 custom dice, 48 custom gems and apples, and much more. My Little Scythe will be available in August 2018.
Sweet! The first edition of My Little Scythe will have a pretty small print run as far as I understand. So you want to get in on the pre-order, which currently only will run through the 10th of this month. That's right, May 10th. As mentioned previously, the game is for 1-to-6 players, ages 8 and up, and plays in about 45 minutes. It will carry an MSRP of $50. Of course, we saw that it's planned for an August release, so that means it will be at Gen Con and should be available in stores in limited numbers on August 17th. Sweet. I'm sure this is probably going to be a pretty fun game. It's not as if Stonemaier Games releases a bunch of crap. Do want to point out there is an image of a little bear, the bear miniature painted, and it's got some mechs behind it. Those mechs are not in this game. I just found the image, wanted to share it, and I believe the artist that I had mentioned previously in the news piece did the paint job on that, or was the one who was sharing that image. So it looks kind of neat. So keep your eyes peeled for that. As I mentioned, this doesn't seem like it's going to be produced in large quantities. So if it kind of tickles your fancy, be sure to go over to the Stonemaier Games website, get a little more information, and put your pre-order in before May 10th. Okay, my next piece is about one of the most highly anticipated role-playing game releases of 2018, and that is not hyperbole, folks. It is true. Cubicle 7 Entertainment is now taking pre-orders for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. 4th edition. Yeah, it is 4th edition. Yep, it is. And I've got the dope. Can't put it down, can you? You know what's in here. You've seen them. The twisted ones, the arrogant ones, the lost ones. Oh, you'd like to walk away and life be all cake and daisies, but you know you're going here instead. You'll try to convince yourself it's because you're greedy for the loot or can't resist a fight, but we all know the truth. So ready your sword, clean your pistol, and watch out for that dog. He might be small, but he's unreasonably vicious. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay takes you back to the old world. Get the gang together, create your heroes, or anti-heroes, and set off to make your way through the vile corruption, scheming plotters, and terrifying creatures intent on destruction. The Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Rulebook contains everything you'll need for grim and perilous role-playing adventures in the old world. To whet your appetite, Cubicle 7 have announced 4 things you can expect from the new edition of this beloved game. Your Warhammer for you. Something that is really core to our WFRP is that they've created tools for you to play your Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Cubicle 7 recognize and support that everyone plays their own version of the rules in the setting, and they fully embrace and encourage that. It's your game. With 30 years of history under its belt, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay means a lot of things to a huge number of players. It's an ideal starting point. Don't have much experience with RPGs? What are you watching this show for then? I'm kidding. That's them. They're asking you that question. I'm not. The Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Starter Set is designed to be the ideal introduction with a structured adventure to help you learn how to play. Also containing a guide to Ubersreich. Maybe? There's loads of gaming material for more experienced GMs too. System matters. WFRP4 uses 10-sided dice in a tuned-up version of the familiar D100 system. You can tailor the rules to your preferences or different in-game situations, choosing from a menu of fast roll-under simple tests, dramatic tests giving success levels where you need more than a yes or no result, and even barely rolling at all, if that's your style. And lastly, a passion for Warhammer. Cubicle 7's creative team are lifelong players of the 3 previous editions of the game, and between them have worked on all of these editions too. They bloomin' love Warhammer, and we think it shows. The PDF and physical book are both scheduled to arrive in June. Oh, I should say, I take that back. The PDF is actually going to arrive in June, so that's next month. Physical book is going to follow in July. Now, I can't tell you if that's just in the UK and Europe, or if that will be here on American shores. The standard PDF obviously will be available everywhere, and the book combo together will carry an MSRP of $59.99. The deluxe leather-bound limited edition will also arrive in June, and that will carry an MSRP of $119.99. It's actually a boxed, I guess it's like a slipcase for the book as well. There is also a starter set, which is going to include an adventure to get everybody going. And that is scheduled for August for the PDF, and the box set will be arriving in September. That is going to carry an MSRP of $29.99. All right, so I have to say, I'm not familiar with the second or third edition of Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. I do remember the first edition, and I actually had the core book, pretty big core book that Games Workshop had released. And memory serves me correct, I thought the setting was cool, and I was just kind of getting into Games Workshop stuff. So they weren't super heavy into miniatures yet. But I do remember the setting was really cool, dark. It was grim dark. But that's before you had tons of all these grim dark RPG settings. It was just, I seem to recall the mechanics kind of threw me off a little bit. I thought it was a little too much, too reminiscent of basic role-playing from Chaosium, which I love, don't get me wrong, which powered RuneQuest, and of course, my favorite role-playing game of all time, Call of Cthulhu. So I thought, it's kind of a rip-off system a little bit, but I do think the setting was very cool. I have to say, Cubicle 7 Entertainment does phenomenal work. I've yet to ever run across any of their RPG products that stink, that aren't quality. Granted, I may have little dings against some of the system rules for some of their games, but they do awesome stuff. So I'm telling you right now, I know Cubicle 7 is going to knock this out of the park, because they are one of my favorite role-playing game companies, and they make other games too, don't get me wrong, but they are one of my favorite role-playing game companies, bar none. Enough said. All right, there is also an interesting looking historical miniatures game which is arriving on the scene, and it's from a company called League of Augsburg. And I had to say, this is sure to be of interest to fans of the Pike and Shot era. Here's the dope on Beneath the Lily Banners, The War of Three Kings. Take the field and win the crown of England for your chosen liege lord. Fight for King James, and aided by your French allies, lead the Irish army to victory against the usurper and his foreign horde. Support King William's claim to the throne and captain an international army of English, Irish, Dutch, Danish, and French Huguenot soldiers to wrest the crown from the hands of the tyrant. The War of Three Kings offers the opportunity for a game set between 1660 and 1721 to be played with simple yet elegant mechanisms which deliver a smooth playing experience, authentic period flavor, and loads of fun. The system covers pike and shot warfare in all Western and Central European theaters. This third edition of Beneath the Lily Banners, first released in 2009, has refined the gameplay, allowing users to focus on enjoying the spectacle created by miniature gaming, one of history's most colorful periods as well. About the War of Three Kings. It includes fully revised mechanisms for Beneath the Lily Banners. Also includes extensive additional rules section. There's Continental Wars covered as well. There's fully illustrated examples of play, as well as uniform guides. It's available in hardcover, full color. It's 184 pages, and it's available for $44. It's available both in the UK as well as here in the US. I have to point out, this looks pretty impressive. I like the layout of the rule book, most definitely. And from a company I've never heard of, that's pretty impressive. The only knock I've got from what I can see of the War of the Three Kings is the cover looks kind of odd. It's sort of almost, I know it's not photoshopped, but it's CGI'd faces. And it sort of looks like, I don't know, is that like the author's face? Just, it doesn't look real natural. It looks kind of odd. But it's just a cover. Who cares about the cover, right? It does look like a pretty cool book. And $44 for a miniatures rule system hardcover book, that's not a bad deal. All right, and finally, coming from GMT Games in June, although I believe it's late June, is an epic scale World War II game which has certainly piqued my interest. And I've got the dope on Hitler's Reich. No stacks of armies, no hexes, no overly lengthy rules to learn. Hitler's Reich takes 5 minutes to set up and 2 hours or less to play. Players fight over Europe, across North Africa, the Atlantic and Mediterranean, and into Russia, using a simple dice-enhanced conflict card comparison combat mechanism. Say that 10 times fast. Or as one board game geek poster better put it, a simultaneous revelation of cards similar to Twilight Struggle's headline phase, but with a choice of what conflict card to play, all with dice added in. Includes high-quality wooden pieces that mark progress, which is also aided economically, politically, and on the battlefield through the competition for and play of event cards drawn from 3 unique decks. One for the Axis, one for the Allies, and one from which either side can attempt to draw. Hitler's Reich is the first of the Card Conquest system game series in which players recreate epic military contests of history in short, comparatively simple and easy to learn, but hard to master games. Oh no, they went there. They went there. No. Oh, easy to learn, hard to master, difficult to master. I hate that line. I was so looking forward to this game too. I'm just kidding. Designed to be set up in minutes and played to conclusion in one sitting, these are not simulations, but games, albeit ones packed with enough historical flavor, excitement, and decision-making to give you the feeling of being there at the highest levels of command. In Hitler's Reich, one side is the axis of Nazi Germany, Fascist Italy, and their East European minions. The other is the allies of the United States, Great Britain, and the Commonwealth, along with the Soviet Union. It's April of 1941, and Hitler, already master of Europe and much of the Mediterranean, is poised to launch his Great March East, Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of Soviet Russia. Do note, although Hitler's Reich is designed for 2 players, a 3 and 4 player variant is going to be included for multiplayer and team play, as well as an intriguing solitaire game. Nice. Hitler's Reich will be shipping in June, as I mentioned. I do believe there's still time to get in on a pre-order and receive Hitler's Reich at a discounted P500 price of $48. The MSRP on the game is going to be $69. I should also mention the images that I'm using outside of the box cover, I do believe are playtest materials. So I'm sure, especially the map or the board at least, is going to be jazzed up by the fine folks over at GMT. Roger McGowan, I wouldn't be too shocked if he's somehow involved with some of the artwork. Mark Simonich, I believe I'm pronouncing the last name correctly. Maybe he's involved with it as well. But this does seem pretty cool, and seems like a game that I could easily get my nephew Cameron to sit down and play, because he really does dig World War II, the Vietnam era. He's all getting into like military history, kind of thanks to his uncle Jeff too. But anywho, this seems like a game that would be probably right up his alley. So might be a little, I don't want to say basic or simplified, but might not be as heavy as some wargamers out there would like. But hey, we can always use some more gateway games to introduce people to the hobby. All right, so that is it for the news today. Got a few things zipping around, working on some stuff for the crowdfunding project that's going to launch on the 15th. I believe it should be the 15th. Working with some other companies. I don't want to mention anybody yet who might be on board because nothing's been finalized yet. But should be kind of cool. One thing I am going to point out, and if you have never watched the show before, or maybe you haven't caught certain episodes, because I know there are some people out there who they watch the Daily Dope on Wednesdays, or they watch the Daily Dope on Fridays or Thursdays, because Wednesdays are war games, Thursdays are normally role-playing games, and Fridays are normally family fun games, family-friendly games. So it's very possible that you might be watching and don't happen to realize that back on March 15th, I had a near-fatal heart attack. So the medical bills are floating on in. And I want to try to keep the gaming gang and the Daily Dope around, because I operate the website and this show on a tiny budget. So isn't it obvious? I mean, come on. Here in the Duct Tape Studios. So anyway, I do want to mention that there will be the opportunity at Origins as well as Gen Con to, there's going to be a pledge level where you'll be able to sit down with Elliot Miller, my best friend, former collaborator on the Gaming Gang, and who operates the website voiceofe.com, which is all about gaming and things like that as well. You're going to be able to sit down and game with us on I believe we're looking at Friday night. So about 4 hours of gaming. So that's going to be a pledge level there. We're also going to have dinner and gaming, which is going to be available as well. I think we're going to do that Saturday night, and this will be available at both Origins as well as Gen Con. So if you want to hang out, play some games, or, grab something to eat, talk about the hobby, other stuff, play some games, you're going to have an opportunity. I will mention that the meal in gaming that we're going to do is not going to include adult beverages. So anyway, like I said, there'll be more about that coming up probably next week. I'm probably going to announce quite a few different things next week. Just give people a heads up. All right, so if you're curious about what might be happening on tomorrow's show as well as early next week, let me share. Tomorrow I'm going to take a first look at Barbarian Battlegrounds, which is going to be coming from Greenbrier Games. And this is a family game, if you like bears beating on each other, I guess. Gotta dig the artwork. Artwork's kind of fun, kind of like that. So that's on tomorrow's show. Then on Monday, I am going to review Reanimator, the board game from Dynamite Entertainment and Lynn Vander Studios. I was supposed to do this on the Tuesday show, but there wasn't a Tuesday show. And then on Tuesday, speaking of Tuesdays, I will be reviewing Helios Expanse. Or I shouldn't say reviewing it. I'm going to do a first look. I was going to say, it's still in shrink, man. I'm not going to review it by not even, opening it up. I'll do a first look and unboxing of Helios Expanse, which is also from the fine folks over at Greenbrier Games. Okay, so that's what's cooking. So let's take a look at Torg Eternity, which is from the fine folks over at Ulisses North America. And if you're not familiar with Ulisses North America, they happen to be I guess we'll say an imprint of Ulysses Spiel, which is the biggest producer of role-playing game books in the world, including the United States. So, I believe Torg Eternity actually arrived on the scene in 2017. It's written by Shane Lacey Hensley, Daryl Hayhurst, Marcus Plotz, Dean Gilbert, and Ross Watson. With art provided by, and I know I'm going to get a bunch of these people's names wrong, so I apologize up front, Chris Bivens, Matthias Kalza, Dennis Darmody, Talon Dunning, Bien Flores, Gunship Revolution, Alita Saxon, and Andy Trebolt. The 280-page core book is available in PDF from our fine friends over at Drive-Thru RPG, or you can score the beautiful hardcover book for $49.99 through the Ulysses North America website, your friendly local gaming stores, or even possibly through your favorite online retailer. All right, so let's pop on over to the other camera, and I will move this from the side over here. So here we go. And first off, Torg originally came out, if my understanding is correct, Torg originally arrived on the scene back in 1990. It was from West End Games, and I have to say, West End Games really did some awesome games back in the day. They were really big in the 80s, early 90s. I gotta be honest, I'm not sure when they actually kind of shuttered their doors. I think it was late 90s. And they did Paranoia. They also did the D6 Star Wars role-playing game, which was just so well done that authors of Star Wars novels actually used the various different supplements from that Star Wars game as pretty much research materials. I mean, that's how in-depth that was. So one of the games that they released was Torg. And let me wet the old whistle here because it's dry down here in the duct tape studios again today. And it's about 30 degrees cooler down here than it is upstairs. Kind of bizarre. I don't remember it being that large a difference because it started to warm up around the Chicago area, although it's really humid too because we had a bunch of rain. But it's probably about the 70s. So, well, I guess I wouldn't say 30 degree difference because that would put it in the 40s down here. But it's probably maybe 60 degrees. All right, so anyway. So Torg comes out from West End Games, and it came out right about the same time as Riffs did for Palladium Books. And I know myself personally was sort of kind of, and I know I wasn't alone. A lot of people kind of thought, oh yeah, it's kind of the same thing. Like Rifts was your characters could like just zip off to these different dimensions and things like that, different realities. And I kind of thought Torg was the same thing because I really got to be honest, I never really looked at either one too closely. So it turns out that is, of course, obviously completely incorrect. And Torg was a big hit and just kind of collapsed under its own weight is kind of the terminology that I sort of use when talking about it out of what I have read and looked at and kind of researched after I got my hands on Torg Eternity back last month. So anyway, was it last month? Maybe it was a little longer. Forget when C2E2 was. Yeah, it was last month. I think it was early last month where I got the huge box of cool stuff from Ulisses North America. But anyway, so the premise of Torg is that we are on core Earth. We live on core Earth, and there are multiple different realities and possibilities. So we as humans, we have what's known as possibility energy. And it means that, so we can do so many different things with our lives. It's just the possibility energy is tremendous. So these bad guys, these reality raiders from these different realms, these different cosms, all want our possibility energy. So they invade the Earth. So what Torg Eternity is it's a different reality than the original Torg, because the original Torg had this big meta plot. Unfortunately, it seems like the vast majority of the focus of that meta plot was in novels for Torg as opposed to a lot of the role-playing game materials. So the player characters kind of came across as being, second class characters in the story. A lot of the NPCs from the novels were getting the big play. Anyway, so this is Torg Eternity. This is 280 pages. This is a hardcover. You're probably not going to be able to see this on camera, just how beautiful this hardcover book is. This is just really, really nicely done. And interestingly enough, you'll see a lot of game books where they'll either have a completely matte finish or they'll have kind of a sheen to them. This actually has both. This has a bit of a sheen as well as matte on both sides, both the front cover and the back cover. The book includes a couple of bookmarks, and I thought, wow, that is pretty cool. And I did an interview with Ian Starcher and Eric Simon about Ulisses North America, and we did talk about Torg, and we kind of covered some of the basics, and we took a quick peek at some of the products in that. And one of the things that Ian Starcher had pointed out was one of the things that you would see with these Ulisses North America releases is that these books are actually produced to the European standards. So having looked at, say, for an example, The Dark Eye, I've been kind of digging into The Dark Eye for a review too, because that was part of what Ulisses North America sent. Really, really nicely done books. Just the physical quality of the paper and the printing is just phenomenal, because I'll be the first to admit, I have had core books, hardcover books, and you crack them open, you're halfway through reading it, and all of a sudden you see that the binding is starting to come apart. And, and it's just, I don't want to rip on particular companies or anything like that. I mean, that happens in the printing industry. Sometimes it's a bad binding job. These are just wonderful. I have paged through and read through this core book a couple of times. The Dark Eye I've gone through, and I also have this in PDF, so I've been reading through it again in PDF too, because I got to be honest, I want to run this system. So, and it's because it's just so gonzo. Yeah, it's just, there's these different realms, these different cosms, and they're all different genres of role-playing games, and it's really, really cool. So another thing I want to point out, the artwork throughout the core book is really, really nicely done. Big kudos to all the artists who were involved in putting this together. All right, so what this book starts off with, it starts off with a bit of a foreword by Greg Gordon, who was actually involved in the original Torg. And I have to be honest, because there isn't a lot out right now for Torg Eternity, I have actually been checking out PDFs of old Torg. That's how pumped I am to actually run this. And that really says something about a role-playing game system when I'm sitting there saying, man, because usually I judge a role-playing game by, would I want to run this? Would I be interested in running this? Does that necessarily mean I'm going to run it? More times than not, no. But this is something I really, really am. In fact, I've talked to my best friend, Elliot Miller, who I was talking about. You'll be able to game and dine with us if you're on the crowdfunding thing. I was telling him a little bit about Torg because he sort of remembered it from back in the day, because we've been gaming since late 70s. Dun, dun, dun. And he's like, yeah, I remember the name of it. What's it about? So I was kind of giving him, and he's like, dude, that sounds awesome. I'm like, yeah, I know. I want to run it. So anyway, so it talks a little bit about the introduction, talks a little bit about original Torg. Then we've got some design notes by Shane Hensley, who I'm sure doesn't really need any introduction. He's worked on plenty of different role-playing games over the years. Savage Worlds is one of Shane's, probably one of his best known projects. Talks about the possibility wars. Talks about the High Lords. Those are the main villains. Those are the leaders of these different cosms that have invaded. The Torg is sort of. Funny thing is, Torg actually originally meant the other role-playing game for West End Games when they were designing it, and they couldn't, because they hadn't come up with a name for it yet. So they called it Torg, and then it just stuck. So in the game itself, the Torg is actually this all-powerful leader. So all these High Lords are all kind of vying to become the Torg. Storm Knights are the player characters themselves. So one thing that this game book does a little bit differently than a lot of other role-playing game books, including, say, for an example, The Dark Eye, the English edition from Ulysses North America, is it doesn't start off with character creation. And I like that in a game. I don't necessarily always like where, chapter 1 is, okay, so this is how you're going to roll up characters. This is how you're going to create your characters. Sort of like, well, I don't know anything about this game world or this setting or this system. How are you throwing me into just creating characters right off the bat? Now, that's not every role-playing game book. There have been books where it started off with character creation where I'm like, oh, okay, this is cool. But there are some, actually I should say there are many that begin with character creation, and you're just like, I don't know anything about this, especially as a player, not necessarily as a game master. But as a player, you're sort of like, huh? How am I creating a character when I don't really even know what's going on in this game? So in the core book here, we actually start off with, this is classified top secret info. I better close that up so you can't see. Now it's actually showing the different cosms that have invaded. So for an example, here in the US has been invaded by the Living Lands, which is kind of a, almost like a land that time forgot sort of setting where it's all dinosaurs and these lizard men, and the humans are actually devolving. So that is the cosm in the US. So one thing I like talks about the various different cosms. So we've got core Earth, and we've got these axioms. So we've got magic, social, spirit, tech. So one of the big concepts in Torg is that on core Earth, we're in our own reality, right? We're in our reality. Whereas when we cross over into these other cosms, these other areas that these cosms have invaded and taken over their reality, things change. So, for an example, the kind of fantasy setting of Isle, there's magic, but the tech axiom is low. So, for an example, say laptops and tablets, things like that would not work. Although, unless you're a reality rated, a possibility rated character, which are the player characters, the Storm Knights, they're heroes. So a lot of times they can carry things into other cosms that actually go against these axiom numbers and still operate them. But they can have problems where those things change. So we're talking about, okay, here's Core Earth, the state of the world, strangeness before the possibility wars. So as I mentioned, this is supposed to be a core Earth, but it's not necessarily our own Earth. So, like for an example, the Loch Ness Monster is probably real. Bigfoot is probably real. There's, kind of like white magic, things like that, probably really does exist. Voodoo probably is real. These kind of things is what make up the core Earth of the game. It talks about the different world laws, which are kind of cool. Talking about just specific aspects of these worlds. So, like for an example, core Earth has the law of hope, that you can be completely down and out, but we as Earthlings still feel that, we may still have a shot. There's still hope. So then we've got Isle. This is kind of the fantasy that I was talking about. So as we can see here, kind of magic 24, social 16, spirit, tech. So basically magic is what you would think it would be. It's the ability to use magic. Social is kind of social concepts. So for an example, the living lands, the one that I mentioned, is kind of like the land before time, or the land that time forgot. The social axiom is low, so people can't conceive of things like money or nations or jingoism, things like that. They can only think of things like, like a tribe or the family. The tribe is kind of like the biggest social grouping that they can comprehend. So spirit is more kind of like miracles, and then tech is obviously tech. So Isle is kind of the cool fantasy setting, the kind of, Pathfinder D&D setting, but it's still overlaid over the real world. And England and parts of Europe have been transformed by the Isle Cosm. So here we show, this is where, and I should point out that with the Corebook, I do believe that Ulisses North America is looking at doing a big mega plot with Torg Eternity, just like original Torg. So these are kind of the different zones that Isle, our reality has been warped. But that doesn't necessarily mean that a year from now or 2 years from now, that's still going to be what Isle looks like. All right, so then we talk about the world laws of Isle. Then we got the cyber papacy, and this is probably going to be something, if somebody's not familiar with the original Torg, that might cause some issue, because the cyber papacy, at least from my understanding, more because there is some information about each of these cosms, but it's not overwhelming in the book because the book's only 280 pages long. But the cyber papacy is kind of like they're from another world, but that world is almost like a mirror image of Earth up to a certain point. And there was a schism through the Roman Catholic Church and all these other things. So this might cause some controversy with some folks, especially those out there who are Roman Catholic, because this is a cyber pope who's the villain from this cosm, or I should say the big bad from this cosm. But it's important to keep in mind that This papacy is located in Avignon, which is in France, as opposed to Rome. So there still is a pope in Core Earth who's fighting. The Vatican is fighting against this cyber pope and his cybernetic kind of cyberpunk minions. And this is a very kind of paranoia, kind of William Gibson would kind of dig this this cosm sort. So there's a lot of cybernetic enhancements for the NPCs as well as players. So that was pretty cool. See here, the law of suspicion that is in the cyber papacy. Then we got the living land. This was I was talking about. There's the areas of North America that the living land has pretty much conquered. And it is the East Coast up through, unfortunately, Chicago, boo. Part of the West Coast, as well as an area up in Canada. So it talks about the living land. So for an example here, we see the axiom for magic is 1. So it's not conducive to magic. Social 7. Remember I had mentioned where it's, people can't conceive of driving a car. Now, the interesting thing too is that a lot of the non-player characters in Torg are changed when the possibility wars begin and these maelstrom bridges come down and all these creatures and dinosaurs and all the like there's demons and other stuff in different cosms all start coming onto the earth. People are changed and they actually kind of I don't want to say mutate, but they take on the axioms and laws of that cosm. So it's possible that in the living land, an NPC could be a business person, and then all of a sudden the possibility wars begin and they start kind of transforming. They don't remember what accounting is, things like that. Maybe they could bust out an abacus, but and they kind of they don't understand social bonding and social media and things like that. It's also important to keep in mind that in Torg there are huge areas. The vast majority of Earth is still Earth, or core Earth, I should say. So that's the living land. See, as I mentioned, here are the areas. This is kind of a secret area up in Canada. Then we got the world laws like law of savagery, law of life. Interestingly enough, in the living land, what happens if something dies? It decays right away. Then we got the Nile Empire. The Nile Empire is kind of a 1930s pulp adventure. Pretty cool. So interesting aspect of the Nile Empire is that it's kind of like if you wanted to role play characters like the Shadow or the Spider. And so you've got that. You've got like the pulp villains, plus this kind of underlying Egyptian mythology to it. So pretty cool, like weird science. So and it says like the world laws here: law of action, law of drama, law of heroism. Then we have Orosh. I think that's how it's pronounced. It's actually an anagram of horror. And this is like the horror cosm. And it's overseen by the Gaunt Man, he's actually the biggest of the big bads because he's the one who got all these High Lords together to invade. So it talks about that. We've got the world laws here: law of eternal corruption, law of fear, law of perseverance. Now, one of the interesting aspects about this is that we also have these Victorians. So it's like Victorian British who also come to try to fight these horrors. So kind of bizarre. So it's sort of like the 1880s sort of stiff upper lip, red uniforms, for the army and that. Kind of bizarre. There's some stuff. Of course, a lot of this stuff is just for the GM. But pretty interesting. It's fairly interesting. Then we've got Pan Pacifica, which is a big difference then from original Torg. Original Torg, Pan Pacifica was Nippon Tech, and it was kind of I don't know, along the lines of the Japanese megacorp kind of theme. Where now Pan Pacifica is more than just Japan, and it still does have that kind of megacorp, but it also has a focus more on like psionics, using mental abilities. All right, moving right along. Then we've got Thurkold, which is pretty cool. It's like these demons, and they invaded Russia, but Russia was able to fight back and nuke their Maelstrom bridge. This seems pretty unusual, pretty wild. I don't want to spoil a lot of stuff, but yeah, you definitely want to check these out. Now, unfortunately, pretty much this is the info that you get about the different cosms, and that is one of the things where it's kind of like, oh, really? Come on. I want to know more about these. So unfortunately, if you just have the core book, and of course, there's more info further in for the GM, but not a ton. You kind of just get a little bit of a taste of each of the cosms. And one of the things I would have liked to have seen is a lot more detail. Because these days, it's not unusual for you to see a 400-page core book, 500-page core book for a game where people are really, really getting their money's worth. Starfinder is an example. Starfinder clocks in well over, I want to say it's over 400 pages. It's been a while since I did the review for it. So, as cool as this book is, and as really well put together this book is, I do wish there was just more background, and I'll cover a couple other things too. So now we talk about the Storm Knights. Now this is when we start talking about how you create your characters, and I would have to say that this is not super detailed. So character creation is certainly not going to be for those out there who love to sit down and do some min-maxing with their characters. Really not. So you're going to have your different attributes. So we're going to see here, it's going to talk about, okay, so your attributes, you've got charisma, dexterity, mind, spirit, strength. That's pretty much it. Then you're going to have some sub stats that you'll use. And so you get skills, you've got perks. Talk about different races, because you can have player characters who are actually, everybody in these cosms aren't necessarily all gung-ho to be, invading the Earth. There are individuals in groups of resistance for an example, like the Living Land. There are the lizard people. There are plenty of the lizard people who want to actually help the humans fight off the big bad High Lord of the Living Land. All right, so anyway, so we've got different perks. There you go. There are the lizards in the Living Land are called the Edinos. I think that's how it's probably pronounced. All right, so going through the Storm Knights. And effectively what a Storm Knight is, they are a unique individual. There are not millions upon millions of Storm Knights. So there's special heroes that are able to actually kind of warp reality once they kind of activate, right? So once they find themselves in a position that demands heroism, usually they undergo this kind of change, and they could change to the cosm that they're in as well. So for an example, you could have like a core Earth character who they're in Isle, and they go through this like crisis, and they actually change into like a wizard or into a thief, or things like that. A traditional kind of fantasy sort of character, but still retaining much of their own knowledge. So kind of cool. It's a little tricky, some of the rules. When we get into the rules, so here we go. So we've got psionics, pulp powers. Now the way that let me grab some of these dice. The way that the resolution for various different tasks are through 20-sided dice. So this is what throws things off a little bit. So you got your 20-sided die. Now this is one of the Torg Eternity dice from the set. There's a set where it's kind of cool. So it's got the red and blue kind of floating inside. And the set also includes a couple of 6-sided dice where the 6 has been replaced by the infinity symbol. So normally what you're going to do is you're going to roll a 20-sided die, and on a 10 or a 20, you're actually going to roll the die again. So there's kind of like an exploding die mechanism to this. So if, for an example, let's say you rolled a 10, then you rolled a 20. Well, now you got 30. You're going to get to roll again. But for an example, if you rolled a 10 or a 20, and then you rolled a 3, you're going to get at least a 10. So that kind of bump that you get, that exploding die that you get, is always going to be a minimum of 10. And the funny thing is, you're not actually going to like use this number to compare it to a difficulty number. No, you actually use this number to figure out a bonus. So there's a bonus that gets added to like your skill, and then you kind of compare that. It's a little wonky in some ways. I mean, it does make sense. It's just some players who are used to traditional role-playing games and rolling dice looking to either like better a difficulty number, or they have to roll under a skill number or what have you, are going to be a little thrown off by this premise of the bonus. And I'll get to that in just a second. Then when you're fighting, if you successfully hit somebody, you roll. These dice are basically your damage dice. So you may have, for an example, you might have a physical weapon, let's say a sword or something. It's going to have a fixed kind of damage, and then you're going to roll. It'll say like 1 damage die, and then you'll add that to your total. Now you may get the infinity, which once again, there's that exploding die mechanic. You would re-roll, add that, and just continue. So what happens is the way the rules work is it gives player characters an opportunity to really do some just completely over-the-top, phenomenal successes. Now, there still is failures and critical failures. And of course, that's based on the 1, right? So 1 is something bad. Now, especially if you're like in combat, if you roll a 1, that's a critical failure. Usually like with firearms and that, it's a jam or something like that. But if you're using something that's like beyond the axiom of the cosm you're in, you could see that item change into something else or stop working completely. So for an example, like in the living land, cars don't work, airplanes don't work, electronics don't work. Now they could work for these possibility rated characters, the heroes of the game, but for regular ordinary people, they don't work, and they all like decay and break apart. But anyway, this is what I'm talking about. Like, so we've got these difficulty modifiers here in the book. So we've got an adjusted difficulty number as well as a modifier, and it says very easy to near impossible. Then it talks about, okay, here's your bonus chart. So for an example, you're sitting there and you roll on your bonus chart. If you rolled, let's say, a 15 on a 20-sided die, it's not really a 15, it's a 2. So the 2 is being added to find out what your success levels are. So if you exceed by 0 to 4 points, it's a standard success. If you exceed by 5 to 9 points, it's a good success. 10 or more is outstanding. Takes a bit of figuring out. Then we've got talking about failure, mishaps, that's the one. Depending on what you're using, you could be using a weapon where their mishap could be like 1 to 4. Talks about the possibilities. Now, the possibilities, you can utilize tokens. I do actually have, I forgot to bring them, take them out and put them over here. I do have like poker chips that are from Ulisses North America, and they are possibility chips. So, and it's pretty cool. So you can spend the possibility, you can add a die, you can re-roll dice. And of course, normal NPCs do not have these possibilities because the possibilities are actually being drained from people. That's what the possibility energy, that's why these reality raiders are here, is they're trying to drain the earth, and it's the earth's people of this possibility energy, which the Storm Knights still possess. So then we got the drama deck, and it talks about the drama deck. It is not something that comes with the rules. It's not something that, as far as I understand, you can actually get as like a PDF download for free. I did receive a box. This is the drama deck here. I received this from Ulisses North America. And there are actually 3 decks. So there's a Destiny deck, there's a drama deck, and then I consider this one deck, but they're broken up into the cosms. So we've got different cosm decks. So the green here is the living land. Okay, so players will normally get a cosm card. And the way the action is kind of broken down in Torg, which is not unusual for role-playing games, is you'll have an act, and those acts are made up of scenes. So players will usually get one of these cosm cards, and it's just kind of like building on like the drama of that cosm. So you could have, there's a mutation, there's an outbreak. Oh, wait a second, this isn't the living land, this is Pan Pacifica. Hang on, where's the living land? Where did it go? Oh no, I'm looking at Destiny cards. All right, dummy. Come on, dummy. Nah. I thought green was the living land. Yeah, here we go. The brown is. Duh. I have not run this yet. As I said, I'm like I really want to run this. So for an example, this is like right there. That's what I was gonna say. Dinosaur attack. Dun dun dun. Oh no. So a player, the players get these. They each get a card, and they actually get to play the card when they feel like it, when they want to change something up. And it's usually something bad for the players. But what it actually will end up doing is they'll be able to score more possibilities, because players begin with 3 possibilities as far as starting off the like the session, your game session. They'll get 3, but they can earn more. This whole thing is you want the players to be spending the possibilities and doing stuff to be able to earn more possibilities or these destiny cards. So the players will normally have a hand of 4 destiny cards, and it's all different stuff, and they're just, for the most part, they're kind of like modifiers with what's going on in the different rounds of the game. So just, I mean, if you're just doing some role playing where it's like characters are talking to other NPCs and stuff like that, no, you don't use these cards. But when it gets into kind of like the nitty gritty, like combat or chases and stuff like that, then you start utilizing these destiny cards, and the players will have a pool of cards. So they're going to have usually 4 cards in hand. I'll kind of give you an idea. So, for example, we got willpower. Willpower says add 3 to your charisma, mind, spirit, or related skill total. Willpower may be played after determining the success level of the test. So if there was something that had to do with that attribute or those skills, you could say, okay, well, I'm going to play willpower. Got alertness, supporter. Supporter is a big one where it actually gives bonus points to another player. So the reason why these Destiny cards are utilized is to kind of increase the drama of the scene. So we have two different kinds of scenes. We have just kind of a standard scene, and then like the big, critical moments of an act will be considered a dramatic scene. And then this is a game master facing deck, and it's the drama deck. And each round, one of these cards will be drawn. So it gives you kind of the initiative. Are the heroes going first? Are the villains going first? There's also kind of a 4-stage process, like when there's like disarming a bomb or big chase or things like that. It's you kind of break it down into steps A, B, C, D. This card's going to determine what steps the players can actually try to complete, and so on and so forth. It'll also show like accepted actions, where if the characters take the action, and it's actually villains as well, that like if the heroes take an approved action, they can actually score more Destiny cards by doing that. So because part of the kind of mind think behind Torg is that heroes shouldn't constantly be just out there killing people, even bad guys, right? Even the villains, demons, stuff like that. Heroes don't necessarily resort to violence and death dealing. So not to say that big fights, big gunfights and big battles and stuff don't break out. I'm not saying that, but that shouldn't be the first resort for these Storm Knights, for these heroes. So I thought that's kind of cool too. Now, the thing is, in the rules here, they don't do a great job of kind of explaining how these decks work. Now, maybe it's because I haven't played the game, I haven't run the game, that I don't see how these cards actually really all kind of mesh together. So that kind of throws me off. The other thing I do want to mention too is that, the core book, if you buy the core book, the hardcover is effectively $50. The PDF is effectively $25. You also need the cards to play. And the cards carry an MSRP of $25. So like I said, I'm not aware that you can get a download of the drama deck for free because you've purchased the core book. So I gotta ding Torg Eternity, because you buy the core book, but you can't run the game the way it's designed without having these cards. So little irritating, gotta be honest, it's a little irritating for putting myself in someone's shoes who's buying the game, right? This is a review copy. It's not as if I went and bought it. But I can sit there and say, hey, you know what? If I were sitting there all pumped about playing Torg and I picked this up and found out, wait a second, I gotta buy these cards to play it, I'd be a little miffed. I really would. Now, there is a PDF download that's on DriveThruRPG, which I think is like $5 from like a third party, talking about how to play Torg Eternity without cards. Now, the original West End Games version of Torg did not have these drama cards, the drama deck, but I believe a later edition from West End Games did. They incorporated this in. So, all right, so anyway, so now we go into the rules, the nitty-gritty. This is not necessarily a real crunchy system. I'm not going to say it's rules light either, so it's kind of middle of the pack. All right, so got to admit there are some pretty cool extended examples through the book as well. Then we start getting into gear like, now we're talking about like various aspects of different scenes where using vehicles in combat, chases, environmental hazards, now we start getting into different gear. And I honestly wish, I mean, there's really nice artwork throughout this, but I wish there was a little more artwork that was, you could tell was specifically geared to certain aspects. Like, for an example, they'll talk about different vehicles and stuff, and you're sort of like, I have absolutely no clue what that looks like. Granted, we've got stats for it, and you get a paragraph about it, but it'd be nice. But then again, what can you do? So we've got firearms, and of course, with the different adventure books, there are there's more gear and stuff like that too. All right, so we're talking about like cyberware, occult tech, heavy weapons, aircraft, railroads. I mean, then we got reality. Now we kind of get into some of the GM info here. There's the contradictions, which are kind of cool. So if your character, if the player characters are doing something that really conflicts with an axiom of a cosm, there could be a contradiction, and that character could actually disconnect because the Storm Knights normally will be connected to their own reality. So one of the reasons why they're heroes, because they can operate in different cosms without those cosms changing their reality. But it's possible if they're doing something that really contradicts with the axioms of that world, of that cosm, they can disconnect, which is kind of cool, which will make them or something they're utilizing transform into something that fits into that that cosm. So as an example, maybe somebody's using a tablet and they're in Isle, right? So that's like the fantasy. Well, if they disconnected, if that item kind of like disconnects, it could turn into, say, a book. So kind of cool. Then little sections on different aspects. They're not real big. Once again, this is something else that I wish there was a little bit more of, but I kind of understand from the previous edition, like magic and cyber tech and stuff like that, you had to pick up the supplement book to actually get it. I don't know if that's completely true or not, because obviously I haven't looked through all of the old Torg stuff. But we do have a little section about magic, some spell descriptions. Then we've got miracles. So miracles are what normally will take place in the living land, as well as the horror cosm. We've got psionics, which is from Pan Pacifica. Then we got a GM's guide. One thing that is not in the core book that I always like to see in core rule books are sample adventures, like an adventure, even if it's only 10 pages long, that really kind of gives the players and the game master an idea of how to run the game. This does not include that. It does give you some pretty good advice on creating adventures. Talks about eternity shards. Eternity shards are items from history that have like a real powerful hold on our reality, so they can become almost like powerful weapons in the hands of the Delphi Council, which is kind of this mysterious shadow group in the U.S. that kind of operates the Storm Knights, or a group or groups of Storm Knights. So that's kind of cool. It talks about each of the different cosms, but once again, not a ton of info about each. Then we got a small kind of bestiary. Not a ton of stuff in that either. So, like I said, I really like Torg Eternity. I think it's really cool. I am going to run this with the gang and just go like way over the top. But I do have to ding the core book a little bit in some respects. First off, because you really can't play without these decks. So that's kind of a bummer that you have to spend additional cash to be able to play because you need the decks. I think they're available as a download PDF to print them out yourself, but from Drive-Thru RPG, but they're not free. You got to pay for them. And of course, if you get them physically, then you're paying a little bit more. That said, I do think that the cards are going to come into play and be very cool, but as I mentioned, having not run the game, doesn't seem like the rules were crystal clear on how they really work. So, or they're going to actually work a lot better than I seem to grasp from the core book. Also want to point out there are some other items, and I will review the day one adventures in probably maybe next week. All depends. I've got some other RPG stuff cooking too. Plus, I want to get a review of the Dark Eye out there for you. But I thought this was kind of interesting. I'm just kind of showing it off because these are day one adventures. So these are adventures in each of the cosms on the first day of their invasion. So pretty interesting. But then again, one of these probably should have been in the core book. Anyway, so what do I completely think as far as Torg Eternity? As I pointed out, I think the premise is really, really wild. And if I didn't, I wouldn't be looking through some of the old Torg stuff just so I know what's going on. Now, I know Ulisses North America has plenty of things planned for Torg Eternity. In fact, the Living Land Kickstarter just ended, and it is just jam-packed with stuff. I mean, it's pretty incredible what all is going to be provided from this Kickstarter, because I want to say they got close to $250,000 in funding. And the nice thing is that it's all pretty much done. It's all pretty much done. They're probably just working on some layout, because now you figure this Kickstarter just ended last month, but it's all related to the Living Land. It just ended last month, and PDFs of a lot of the stuff is supposed to be out to Kickstarter backers this month. And I believe a lot of the print materials are hitting in July, I think it's July. So you know that this stuff had to have been almost all done. So I think it's really cool that there's all this stuff that's on the horizon. The only thing is, as far as if it's like a big mega plot that they're doing, it's going to take a long time for everything to kind of come out. So you understand what's going on, okay, in the first year of the invasion, then the second year. Because that was a big thing about the original Torg, was this big meta plot. Unfortunately, that kind of is what kind of killed the game, is that the aspirations for the game just, what's the old saying? Your eyes are bigger than your stomach, right? West End Games couldn't pull it off. Other problem was that as they introduced Cosm books, they had different rules and things like that, and some of the rules would overwrite other rules in the game, and yeah, that's kind of odd. Power creep kind of thing jumps in. But, so I'm pumped. I'm pumped at the other stuff that's coming from Ulisses North America. Now, as far as adventures, there's already the day one, and then there are Delphi missions, Rising Storm, which are some alpha level, because you're starting Storm Knights. I guess there's like levels to them: alpha clearance, then beta clearance. So I'm pumped at all the stuff that's coming for Torg. That all the stuff that's plotted out that I kind of know about or have an idea about or keep my fingers crossed about. But as far as the core book itself, I think it gets you really pumped about the setting and getting ready to play. I wish there was more info in it. I wish there was more info about the different cosms. It just, like, even the rules section just is sort of I don't want to necessarily say underdeveloped. It's just simply not necessarily crystal clear. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's bad by any stretch. In fact, it's probably going to be much more crystal clear than, say, original Torg. It doesn't have that level of crunch, but it's a little off. It's just a little bit off. So even though I wish there was an adventure in it, and I wish there was more Cosm information, I wish it was clearer about how the decks of cards actually work at the game table, I still think this is a phenomenal book. So it's a weird thing, right? It's like, yeah, kind of have an issue with this, kind of have an issue with that. Wish there was this, wish there was that, but I still think this is awesome. So, just not phenomenal. So, if I were to sit down and give it a scale of 1 to 10, as far as the Korg, I need a sip. Boy, it's like, gosh, tongue got stuck there. That's it. End of the shows. Hey, so, no. Anyway, so, scoring Torg Eternity, the core rulebook, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'm going to give it an 8.3, which is still a very solid recommendation. It's just not perfect. It's and maybe it's just me I'm kind of getting spoiled because I'm seeing these like $50, $60 core books that are like that thick as opposed to 280 pages. Although Ulisses North America has done just a beautiful job putting this together. So anyway, I really, really recommend Torg Eternity. What I would probably say is if you're someone who digs PDFs, maybe save yourself a little bit of money on the core book and get it in PDF. Yeah, maybe. Depends. I mean, because there are people out there who are big fans of Torg who are like super pumped and they just love this core book. So I'm just saying, from my point of view, there were some things that could have been ironed out, made a little clearer, or could have been included. So anyway, all right. So pretty long show again today, almost kicking an hour and a half. So I should point out, when you're not watching The Daily Dope, be sure to visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. Well, by now you know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer. I'll be back tomorrow. I will be looking at Barbarian Battlefields. Is it Battlegrounds. Duh. See, it would help if I grabbed the box again. I'll be looking at Barbarian Battlegrounds from Greenbrier Games. So until then, enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and as always, thanks so much for watching.